Our next speaker, Alicia Pérez. She's going to be talking about Kotlin and the web, keys and Ktor.
So, hi everyone. My name is Alicia. I'm a software engineer. This is the title that I chose for my talk. I wanted to make some kind of like, oh sorry, not better. Sorry. So I wanted to make some kind of like fun kind of dad joke. I don't know if I got it, but yeah, that's what it is. So I'm the opposite of this guy. This is actually my first time speaking. So first of all, I want to thank you, the Boston organizers of the Kotlin Everywhere in Boston. And hopefully you will learn something today about Ktor. Does anybody here, is anybody here using Ktor in production out of curiosity? Okay, good. So hopefully you will learn something today. So this is what I'm going to be going to talk about. I'm going to give you like a brief introduction to Ktor. We're going to create a small Ktor project. We're going to create some endpoints and some more features, and then some pros and cons about Ktor. So what is Ktor? Ktor is a framework for building asynchronous servers and clients using Kotlin. We're in the right event for that. It provides a DSL for server-side development. It can be used on web, iOS, and Android, which is pretty cool. And it asynchronously processes server requests. And as a piece of trivia, it's used by JetBrain as the backend of their Kotlin Conf mobile and web app. So the way that Ktor application is built is that we have our main application, and then depending on the functionality that we need to add to it, we just install what they're called features. So they're in charge of providing functionality into the request-response cycle. And it's very easy because we just need to add the specific Gradle dependency that we need. And some examples of features are headers for network calls, processing JSON, which you're going to be seeing shortly, authentication, and routing. So to create a Ktor web application, I'm going to be using IntelliJ because JetBrains. We need a minimum version of Kotlin 1.3. And the engine to handle the request and the responses, I'm going to be using Netty. There are some other engines that we can use, but for these examples that I'm going to be showing you, I'm going to be using Netty. So, pretty straightforward how to create a Ktor project. We can install a plugin for IntelliJ, and usually we just create like a new project and we select Ktor on the left, and then we select the different options. They might not make much sense for you now because I'm going to be talking about the features later. But these are the different options that we can choose. Or we can actually go to this website, the start.ktor.io, and we select the same options, but it allows us to download the actual files and then import them into IntelliJ. And this is a very simple Hello World application, as you can see. So besides the import part, it's just 10 lines of code. We have the main function. We instantiate the Netty server and we specify the port. And then this is the routing feature that it comes with the project that we just created. And for this example, we just have the get request for the slash path, and then we have the call available to just respond with just some text. And then we have the server start listening. And this, so the way that we run it is just, I hope that you can see, we just run the function, and then it will start serving on the address that you see here. We just click on it, it will open the browser, and then we have our hello world. So some common features, as I said before, these are the three that I've seen that are most commonly used. So default headers are, it just adds a different set of headers for every HTTP response. Status pages is for mostly error handling. So we just have, we can create different options to make sure that the application is behaving properly. And another important one is content negotiation, that is just to tell the server what to use for incoming and outbound requests. So this is an example of the default headers. So as you can see in line 34, we're just actually installing the default headers feature, and then we just include that header with the request. For status pages, same thing. We install the feature, and then we just we make the application respond whenever there's an error, and to log the exception, we actually need to throw it. So we just throw internal server error exception that is declared in line 50, which is, it just like prompts a very simple message. And this is like a stack trace kind of example of how it would look like if we run into the actual exception. Content negotiation is the one that we're going to be using most. Again, it's pretty simple. We just install the feature, and we have different options available. So, for example, one example that I added there is just to set pretty printing to have the JSON properly formatted. And well, I decided to create like a very, very simple application to have different beers, because the beer scene in Massachusetts is pretty big. So I like IPAs. So I would like to show you the small application that I created. So if you want to follow along, I also created a repo with all the code. So it's increasingly built upon. So every commit has the different phases that I went through to create this application. It's a pretty simple application, so you will be able to understand it very easily. So first of all, we're going to be creating our beer model. It doesn't have a lot. It just has the name, the description. It has an ID, which is an integer, and then it has the alcohol by volume value. And also, we're gonna be having different packages or folders in our project for to have like a clean project. And also, we're going to be creating an in-memory repository. I didn't, well, we can have our own database, and Ktor works pretty well with Mongo, but for this example, I'm just going to be showing you an in-memory repository. I call it beer repository, and it has the main CRUD operations that we can have for beers. We can add a beer, we can just return all the beers and remove beers. And then in our main application, which is the main application of the Ktor project, we're installing the content negotiation for JSON, as I mentioned before. And then we're instantiating actually our beer repository, and then we're creating a route passing the beer repository to it, so we can have access to our list of beers. And in that file, we're going to be having two paths. In this case, we could have like a separate file for just the home or the slash route, but I for simplicity, I just decided to add the two on the same file. So we have the slash path and the slash beer path. And in the route, we have a get request for the home path, and it will just respond with the, we call the .beers from the beer repository, so you will return the actual list of the beers. And then we're also adding a route for whenever we receive a post request with the beer path, that it will, since we have installed the JSON feature, we will know that we're receiving an actual beer, and then we just add it to our repository, and then we can respond to it. So since we cannot do it directly from the browser, the way that we have to add a beer with a post request, well, we can also use Postman if we wanted to, but we can also use curl, and it's this is the whole command. So we make a post request, we're sending JSON. This is an example of the data with all the different values for it, and then since again it's running locally, we just specify the complete URL. So hopefully you can see, so we just open a new terminal, and then we paste the curl command, and it actually returns the beer, and also since the application is running, it will also show it on the browser, because we have specified the get for the home path, and it just returns the beer that we just posted with the 3D printing formatting. So yeah, I guess it works, but it's kind of annoying to have to post with curl every time that we want to add a beer to our repository. So enter FreeMarker. FreeMarker is a template engine by Apache that we can use to create more, let's say, browser-friendly feature to our application. So it just takes a template using the FreeMarker language. It takes the Java objects. I don't know if I'm allowed to say Java in a Kotlin conference. So it's just going to be like a Kotlin object, and then it's pretty cool because it outputs HTML. So again, same thing. We have to install the feature, and we have to indicate the paths for the FreeMarker. So if you can see in line 24, we just install the FreeMarker feature, and then we also specify the template loader, which is just going to, we're going to be telling it that we have, if you also see the file structure, we have a folder with the beers.ftl file, which is our template file, and this is where all our templates are going to be living. And then for on line 32, there's also, I specified, so if we have any kind of static files, we can specify where or how to read from that, and we have the folder with called styles, because I also added some CSS for the web page. And then we have our beer route as we had before. And also, hopefully you can see as well a little bit. It's mostly HTML markup code, but if you see the form block, we're going to be adding different input fields for every property of our beer. So we will have the name, the description, the alcohol by volume, and then we're also passing a hidden file with the action, and in this case it's going to be add. And then that's all the information that we're going to be sending to the server. And in line 21, you see the actual free marker syntax, and also in line 28, which it will take the beers, the list of beers that we have, and it will iterate over it for however many number of beers that we have, and it will just render a row for each one, because you're going to be seeing it will be like a table. So now we have to modify the actual code that we had in our route file. So for the home get, we will get the beers from our repository as we used to do, but now the way that we return the response is that by calling the free marker content, we're specifying the file with the template, which was called beers.ftl. And then this is the actual map of the objects that I'm passing in line 28 to iterate and create the markup code. And for the post request for the beer path, we just call we can grab the parameters from the call. We retrieve also the action. And depending on the action, we have only add for now. So we just retrieve the rest of the values from the parameters. We add it to our repository, and then we can also redirect in line 42 to home. So it will be refreshing our list of beers. And then this is how it looks like on the browser. So we can add a beer, and we have the button to add, and it will create like a small table. You can see, which is pretty cool because this is actually running on Kotlin. So, in order to delete a beer, it's very easy because we only have, we can still use the same template file, but we just add like a different, we add the option to delete, so it's also a form, and it's going to have the same path and the same post method, but we're going to be passing also the hidden file, but the hidden field. But this time it's going to have the delete value, and we're also going to be passing the ID of the beer so we can delete it. And then also pretty straightforward because we just have to add the delete option for the beer. So we just get the ID from the parameters, and then we just remove it. Calling the function from the beer repository, and then we redirect. So this is how it looks like. So if I had some that I created like with the form before, and then we can also delete manually. So I didn't realize, but I'm actually using the colors from Belgium and Germany, which are also pretty popular from their beers. That wasn't on purpose. So one last thing that I wanted to add to this project is I run into this API that has an endpoint that returns like a random beer. So I thought that it would be nice to, instead of, because I don't know that many beers, so instead of creating them manually with the values that I know, I thought that I could just like create this, call this API that will return like a random beer and just add it to my list. So for that, we just need a secret ingredient, and I'm not talking about hops. And this is coroutines. So I'm still trying to wrap my head around coroutines myself, and it's outside of the scope of the talk. So we're going to be using coroutines for making the API calls. But Ktor uses a standard library from JetBrain that is called Kotlin coroutines under the hood. So in order to be able to create the, to make the calls to these Punk API, I'm creating the actual client, and I'm just using the URL for the API and creating the actual client. There are some options that we can use. I just chose Apache because I believe Apache supports HTTPS, and if we use the default client that Ktor provides, it doesn't support it. Well, for these cases, it doesn't really matter, but just so you know. And we installed the JSON feature so the client knows that it's going to be receiving and sending JSON. And that the heavy lifting is essentially the function getBeer from Punk IPA, and it just actually it's also pretty straightforward because it just calls the get method on the client, and since the application the Punk API, it's going to be returning an array with just one element, which is the random beer. So we just return the element at the index 0, or else an exception. And then same thing for the route. We already have the add and the delete options, so we just add the new option, which is going to be random. So we just instantiate the beer API client. We get a new beer from the Punk IPA, and then we just add it to our list, which was in the repository. And then we just redirect, so it gets refreshed in the browser. And as for the template, it's another form for using the post method for the beer path. And again, we have a hidden file with the value random and then just the button. And this is how it looks on the browser. So we can still add our beers manually, but we now have the option to add like a new one from the API. So it just shows the different beers. So that was the application. Of course, this was like a very, very simple application. But there are some, just so you know, there's a lot more features that we can add to it. We have persistence and sessions. We also have authentication for logging in and logging out, and also for deployment. As in pros and cons, I mentioned it before, it's literally Kotlin everywhere because besides, except for the free marker templates, everything is Kotlin. So if you're also familiar with Node, it's the same thing, Node.js, so it's JavaScript all the way. And the one thing that I didn't really find really helpful was the actual documentation, which is in Ktor.io. It's not, I don't know if it's the wording or that maybe I was looking for different or like more examples. I couldn't really learn Ktor just by the documentation. I had to just look somewhere else. But that was just me. And then also some material that I found useful, if you know Brian Harders, he has a talk from last year at Kotlin Conf. It's a 30-minute talk, it's not very lengthy, but it's really, I found that really useful, and he, of course, he does like a much better introduction to Ktor. And another resource is Ray Wender, that has a small course or tutorial about server-side Kotlin. And with that, this is the end of my talk. So I hope that you learned something about Ktor a little bit, and if you have any feedback, feel free to find me after. So thank you.
All right, there we go. First off, it's great that Francis Gunner was the first beer to show up on the list there.
I'm sorry?
Just trying to make a joke, but when you had an example,
Yeah.
the beer, the first one you had was Francis Gunner?
Yeah. I love that.
Real question was, so this seems great, I'm a big fan of netting and everything like that, but starting to get, one of the concerns I have is one of the things you did talk about was, what are the authentication mechanisms? Is there any things, any out-of-the-box solutions we could plug into Ktor for things like OAuth, that sort of thing?
Well, I didn't really look into that much because, again, this was like a very simple example. But I'm pretty sure that, I mean, there's of course, there's a feature for that, but that's all that I can talk
Just
about.
curious.
Yeah, there's a feature for sure, but I haven't really used it.
Cool, thank you. Anybody have a question?
Thank you.